Counterclockwise. All right. Now, are you getting needle deflection on the audio signal?
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right. What are you getting on your monitor? Am I there?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
This is the beginning of the 1981-82 poetry reading series, to be taped this evening at Jefferson Hall, October 14th, 1981.
Well, it's quite possible that that there is someone here who has never been to a poetry reading before. And it's quite possible that there are some people here who have been to many poetry readings. And I know sometimes I've been to dozens, and sometimes there's a kind of agony that exists before a reading that should have a name in Freudian terminology, like postpartum tristesse is one thing. There must be a name for that feeling that you get before a reading begins, or any performance that might be boring or trying, and it's anticipation, you know, one starts getting pains, or looks at clocks, or thinks, what if I do have to leave early? How will I get out easily? What about the $1.50? Stuff like that there. It's also hard for us up here. You know, it's not so easy. Night after night. Punxsutawney one night, Harrisburg the next night. To do something, I give maybe 20 readings a year, to do something that is for myself interesting as well as for you. Because for me, that's an issue. Because I certainly do not do Punxsutawney one night and Harrisburg the next night and Binghamton, that strange city up north, the next night. And I try to do something or think of something, and I always do it. I feel constrained here. I don't know why. I have this long umbilical cord stretching from my neck. I'm the only person who has an umbilical cord coming out of his neck. Most people have it, you know where, Sharon. And Sharon is a very brave lady. This is the second day in 3 days that she sat in front of me and heard me take off. So 3 days ago, I was sitting on a panel in New York at the Roosevelt Hotel discussing politics and poetry, and with some of my fine contemporary colleagues. And obviously, I was so good that Sharon decided to come back. At any rate, I've been thinking what I would want to do myself, because no matter what I do, it will be new to most of you, but it won't necessarily be new to me. What I thought I would do, it's now 8:15. Is that not so? I thought I would read, say, for 45 minutes in toto. And I might, depending on how things go, want to break it in 2 sections, except I'm afraid I might lose you and you drink wine and eat cheese and get gluttonous. And God knows, here's Lindemann here, what he would do. He's been known to act up at breaks, so we may not take a break. And I think what I might want to do is read from a new long poem that I have been working on. That's very difficult to do and to understand, but it'll be a challenge to me, and it wouldn't matter to you because it's all new to you. What does it matter? It's like a tour of Romania. It's not at all like a tour of Romania, but it's like a tour of Romania. I mean, what's the difference if I show you Moldavia or Bukovina? Does it matter? I mean, you've never been to either place, and you will rave about Bukovina. What are you waiting for? Why don't you come in? No, here's a seat. Here, zip. You make me nervous. If you were shorter, I wouldn't care. Okay. How are you? So we'll do a little Bukovina tonight and a little Moldavia, two provinces in Romania where I come from. I think the last reading I gave, which was last week, I tried to do a thorough job. I tried to give a comprehensive job, to read thoroughly, to make sure that I got a little bit of everything to everybody. And that's really silly. I was reading a friend of mine the other day. He read about 12, 13 poems. He's written about 4,000. So what does it? It's silly to try to do a comprehensive job. I thought I should read from some Lucky Life and some Red Coal. I'm going to read mostly from Red Coal, but I'll read you a couple of poems, just a couple of poems, to start with from Lucky Life, okay? Which is a book that came out in 1977. I'll read, just say, 4 poems from that book. And I'll read for a while, then I'll talk about what I'm doing in between after a while. But first you should get exposed to it. Burying an animal on the way to New York. Don't flinch when you come across a dead animal lying on the road. You're being shown the secret of life. Drive slowly over the brown flesh. You are helping to bury it. If you are the last mourner, there will be no caress at all from the crushed limbs, and you will have to slide over the dark spot, imagining the first suffering all by yourself. Shreds of spirit and little ghost fragments will be spread out for 2 miles above the white highway. Slow down with your radio off and your window open to hear the twittering as you go by. That poem is a commemoration to Scranton, the city of murderers. I understand you kill deer and bear and things around here. You take off school and you do that. There was a Greek philosopher, and I can't remember his name. It may have been Empedocles. And he had this vision that life is eternal. You can't destroy it. And when you cut things in sections, each section then, like a hydra-headed beast, has its own soul, its own properties, assumes a life of its own, And I think it was with the memory. I had a philosophy teacher in college named Dr. Gabbert. I used to write poems about him all the time. One was called Dr. Gabbert Speaks. He was a marvelous philosophy teacher. And he taught me all about Empedocles. I guess is this Empedocles, or anybody in Greek scholars here? Okay. Don't let me talk. Couple more from this book. That was a country poem. I'll read a city poem about Upper West Side, New York, where I lived for a number of years in my 20s, attending Columbia University in unemployment. It's called Let Me Please Look Into My Window. Let me please look into my window on 103rd Street one more time, without crying, without tearing the satin, without touching the white face, without straightening the tie or crumpling the flower. Let me walk up Broadway, past Zach's, past the Melody Fruit Store, past Stein's Eyes, past the New Moon Inn, past the Olympia. Let me leave quietly by Gate 29 and fall asleep as we pull away from the ramp into the tunnel. Let me wake up happy. Let me know where I am. Let me lie still as we turn left, as we cross the water, as we leave the light. I'll do one more New York poem. There's a park. It's a little hard. This one's a little hard. It's called Strauss Park. It's 106th Street and Broadway. And I used to go to Stanley's Cafeteria on 103rd and Broadway to eat breast of lamb for 65 cents. And they were dealing dope out in that park, and I didn't know it because I didn't know what dope was. I was into camels, real camels. And there's a lot of references here that don't worry too much about it. The poem is really about California. It really is. I'll just read the poem. If you know about the Babylonian Jews coming back to their stone houses in Jerusalem, and if you know how Ben Franklin fretted after the fire on Arch Street, and if you yourself go crazy when you walk through the old shell on Stouts Valley Road, then you must know how I felt when I saw Stanley's cafeteria boarded up and the sale sign out. And if you yourself mourned when you saw the back walls settling and the first floor gone and the stairway gutted, then you must know how I felt when I saw the iron fence and the scaffold and the plastic sheets in the windows. Don't go to California yet. Come with me to Stanley's and spend your life weeping in the small park on 106th Street. Stay with me all night. I will give you breast of lamb with a fat dripping over the edges. I will give you the profit of ball, making the blood come. Don't go to California with its big rotting sun and its oleanders. I will give you Sappho preparing herself for the wind. I will give you Mussolini sleeping in his chair. I will give you Voltaire walking in the snow. This is the dark green bench where I read Yeats. And that is the fountain where the Deuteronomist sat with his eyes on the nymph's stomach. I want you to come here one more time before you go to California. I want you to see the Hotel Regent again, and the Edison Theater, and the Cleopatra Fruit Market. Take the iron fence with you when you go into the desert. Take Voltaire and the Deuteronomist and the luscious nymph. Do not burn again for nothing. Do not cry out again in clumsiness and shame. A Pittsburgh poem called Stepping Out of Poetry. Scranton, you may know, had the first completely electrified system in the United States. I just discovered that walking around Scranton Park an hour or so ago. And in Pittsburgh, I used to board the old yellow streetcars, and this is a totally nostalgic poem. I just decided to let myself go completely, without restraint, order, self-criticism, shame. It's shameless. It's called Stepping Out of Poetry. And it makes a reference, I guess it doesn't mention the name, but the library here is the old Carnegie Library. Did you have a Carnegie Library in Scranton? That murderer tended to build libraries in all the cities of Pennsylvania. Stepping Out of Poetry. What would you give for one of the old yellow streetcars rocking toward you again through the thick snow? What would you give for the feeling of joy as you climbed up the 3 iron steps and took your place by the cold window? Oh, what would you give to pick up your stack of books and walk down the icy path in front of the library? What would you give for your dream to be as clear and simple as it was then in the dark afternoons at the old scarred tables? This poem beside it, I'll read that one and one more. They're so good, it's hard to make a choice. Well, this is a poem, it's a complicated poem called Behaving Like a Jew. And in this poem, I'm driving my wife to a hospital nearby to have minor surgery on her neck. And we got and on the way, we passed a dead opossum, as one does, at the side of the road. And as one does, knowing that it's a violation of Ruskin, nonetheless, one stops and picks the dead animal up and throws it in the gutter. Says a prayer for it, a bracha. And then one goes to the hospital and sits in the waiting room amid the Reader's Digest, catching cancer and heart attack. And it lasts for hours that the wife is in there dying. And one says, after all, I'll be alone. Shirts, food. I don't know where the checkbook is. And then I was reading this article by Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh, in the Reader's Digest. It was about death. Lindbergh loved death. He did. He engaged it endlessly. And as he was dying of cancer in Hawaii, he wrote a prose poem about it, how one must accept it. It was a kind of vision of death that was enthralling but horrible to me. I discovered that I had an alternative, altogether other view of death. And that's where I was behaving like a Jew in my response to Lindbergh, who, among other things, in addition to flying across the Atlantic Ocean alone, really he was with a cat. Did you know that? How many did not know that? He was with a cat. His book was called We. Is that not so? I'm telling you the truth. I feel like Léon Curie and Victor Hugo. Anything I say, you laugh because he had the slash face. I mean, I'm a very serious person. And among other things, Lindbergh was a supporter of the America First Party in the 1930s, which was a Nazi front organization. And he said had kind words to say about General Goering and General Goebbels and Corporal Hitler. But however, he's a hero. And once I read this at a place and made some negative comments about Lindbergh, and I was attacked from the audience for being un-American. And I tried to point out that I had nothing against Lindbergh. There's just two different ways of looking at life. And I said that no Jew in his right mind would go across the Atlantic Ocean all alone. I tried to point that out. An Israeli would. Well, okay, we'll get into the poem now. Behaving like a Jew. When I got there, the dead opossum looked like an enormous baby sleeping on the road. It took me only a few seconds, just seeing him there with a hole in his back and the wind blowing through his hair, to get back again into my animal sorrow. I'm sick of the country, the blood-stained bumpers, the stiff hairs sticking out of the grills, the slimy highways, the heavy birds refusing to move. I'm sick of the spirit of Lindbergh over everything, that joy in death, that philosophical understanding of carnage, that concentration on the species. I'm going to be unappeased at the opossum's death. I'm going to behave like a Jew and touch his face and look into and stare into his eyes and pull him off the road. I'm not going to stand in a wet ditch with the Toyotas and the Chevys passing over me at 60 miles an hour and praise the beauty and the balance and lose myself in the immortal life stream when my hands are still a little shaky from his stiffness and his bulk, and my eyes are still weak and misty from his round belly and his curved fingers and his black whiskers and his little dancing feet. And since, from my other book, I'll read you a poem about a mole, I will end up by reading you one poem about a mole in here, a short poem about a mole. Called Underground Dancing. There's a bird pecking at the fat. There's a dead tree covered with snow. There's a truck dropping cinders on the slippery highway. There's life in my backyard. Black wings beating on the branches, greedy eyes watching, mouths screaming and fighting over the greasy ball. There's a mole singing, "Hallelujah! Close the rotten doors. Let everyone go blind. Let everyone be buried in his own litter." This is a picture of me and a friend of mine walking down the Boule Miche, which means Boulevard Saint-Michel, a street that goes down to the dirty river called the Seine in Paris. What's your river called around here? Lack of what? Oh. You know what I thought you said? I think I'll read my mole poem first, since we're on the moles. And this mole poem is about Ruskin, one of my heroes. Do you know, did you study Ruskin in English class? Well, Ruskin, to make a long story short, was a windy writer who wrote about everything from socialism to architecture and did drawings and wrote poetry and lived with his mother and father till he was 50 and had an unconsummated marriage with a woman named Effie and organized a system of street building in Oxford and had Oscar that predated Mao Zedong by 70 years and had Oscar Wilde working in his gang and fell in love with a young girl when he was 60, which was the custom in the Victorian days, not at all outre. In fact, it was her mother, Madame Latouche, who arranged it all. You think we just discovered that stuff now? And her name was Rose Latouche. C'est vrai. That was her name. Rose Latouche. And he loved her dearly. She died of brain fever, which was a disease the Victorian girls used to get. He really adored Rose Latouche. I'm writing a play about the three of them. It's Rose and Madame Latouche. She wanted to join his circle. He had circles, you know. And she, in effect, bartered the access to her daughter. It's an old custom. In the poem, I compare Ruskin to a mole. Now, it's outrageous to compare a man to a mole. In fact, it's a positive example of what Ruskin, in an essay called The Pathetic Fallacy, where he said you should not do things like that. And that's why I did it. The commonality they have is they both dig endlessly underground, building Venetian chambers. Stones of Venice was his most famous book. Dear mole, I have forgotten you, living under the dahlias, making highways under the pines, coming up to sniff blindly like John Ruskin at the pink chrysanthemums and the red berries hanging from the ruined viburnum. Everything depends on your sponginess, the world you created with your shoulders and claws, the long tunnels and the quiet rooms where you can wander like Ruskin, dreaming of smooth floors and vaulted ceilings. He was like you, always cramming and ramming, hating spluttering in disgust, hating repression, living apart from others, adoring mountains, drifting with the vortices, hemorrhaging a little, loving high sounds, loving the crystal orders. He was like you, following the laws of the 14th century, envious of the fish, curiously breathless and obsessed with shadows, loving small girls, living deep in hell, always beginning, always starting over, his head down, his poor soul warbling and wailing. I ate duck for supper tonight at a strange, nice restaurant, but very strange. It was mostly empty. And there were hundreds of busboys wandering around, dressed in German costumes. I guess they were German costumes. They were lederhosen up to their ears. And they,
Where was it?
It was in Austria. I don't know where it was. It was in a shopping center. It was called Hit and Miss or Pooch and Pow. It was a nice place. And I had duck, and after I was halfway done, my hosts tell me, then, you probably are going to die of cancer in a day. They've just discovered some kind of thing. I don't know what it is. A number, an initial that the duck had. I had an initial in me now. I have an initial in me. What is that called? 2 initials. PC, you know, B, 3 initials. I'm through. So in honor of duck, I'll read this poem. Now the poem is called Your Animal, and the poem is a little complicated in one place because it considers a complicated philosophical system called Gnosticism, Gnosticism, but only playfully. Gnosticism is simply separating everything, the good from the bad, the white from the dark, the this from the that, instead of saying they're agonizingly interconnected. And all the religions have flirted with Gnosticism, for it's a simple way to account for evil. And, for example, in Christianity, Gnosticism dominated until St. Augustine said it wasn't true, and once and for all, Christianity, or Catholicism, had rejected Gnosticism. But there were Jewish Gnostics, and there were Christian Gnostics. Okay? In a sense, Gnosticism is giving up on life. It is saying, well, this is totally bad. This must be run by a bad God. But the next place is run by a good God. So the guy that created this place is a god of evil. Blake, for example, accepted that philosophy. And that's why I think he's not a great poet. And he called that god Nobodaddy, or Jehovah, in some false interpretation of the Bible. So no, I don't want to get on and on with this, but Gnosticism. The final end of all but purified souls is to be swallowed up by Leviathan, or to be bound with fiery chains and flogged with 70 stripes of fire. I walk along the mule path, dreaming of my weaknesses and praying to the ducks for forgiveness. Oh, there's so much shit in the universe, and my walks, like yours, are more and more slippery and dangerous. I love a duck for being almost like a vegetable. I love him because his whole body can be consumed, because there's no distance between him and his watery offal. Your animal is almost human, distant from his waste, struggling to overcome the hated matter, looking up with horrified white eyes, eternally hunting for space in the little islands of Riverside Drive and the fenced-in parks of the village. I love duck and potatoes, duck and red beets, duck and orange juice. I love the head of duck dipped in sugar. I love chocolate duck with chipolata sausages, fragrant crisp duck mixed with shrimp and pork. I love the web and the heart. I love the eggs preserved in lime and potash. Completely boned duck filled with ham and chestnuts, fried duck with pineapple and canned red cherries or sections of tangerine. This is a poem against Gnosticism. It is a poem against the hatred of the flesh and all the vicious twists and turns we take to calm our frightened souls. It is a poem celebrating the eating of duck and all that goes with it. It is a poem I am able to write after walking every day through the flocks and loving the babies and watching them slip down the mudsides and float into the current. It is a poem about shooting galleries and cardboard heads, about hunters and their checkered hats and frozen fingers, about snow-white cloths and steaming, laced-up birds and waiters standing in little regiments, getting ready to run in among the tables and start carving. It is my poem against the starving heart. It is my victory over meanness. That's a hard poem to read. Machinery. Most people were taught in English 1 to be suspicious of technology and machinery, or in the history of civilization. That's what Joyce called it, you know, civilization. Did you know that? James Joyce? And is Scranton a Jesuit college? Because I think Joyce went to a Jesuit college, didn't he? So we'll dedicate this reading to Oscar Wilde. And wait a minute, I forgot what I was talking about. It's got to do with the poem. Yes, machinery. So we've been taught to hate machinery. It's the enemy. It destroys the human soul, makes us alienated. Marx, you know, Buber, Nietzsche, whatever, you know, all that stuff. And I was walking in Florida. I was visiting my mother, who lives a block away from Jack's mother. You may not believe that, but that's true. And as I was walking down the street, 11th and Euclid, I heard this whirring noise. I leaped back in terror, thinking it was an insect about to destroy me. And it was just a piece of innocent machinery, an air conditioner. And I knew that I was wrong all those years. We're wrong. Machinery is just our friend. Now, I'm aware of the new theories of machinery, you know, that machinery is no longer an extension of the human imagination, but has its own integrity and all that stuff. But I'm not getting into higher math. This is base nothing. Visiting Florida again. At 11th and Euclid, I stood in front of an air conditioner and listened to it whir. For just a second, I thought it was an insect screaming in anger before it sucked up its enemy or ran into the hibiscus to brood. For the first time, I gave thanks to my brother the machine, my little friend, so out of place in the tropics, so close now compared to the hideous ichneumon waving its long needle or the velvet ant searching for babies, so misunderstood and abused. Shivering in the heat, I wanted to touch some great yellow steam shovel or biplane, something so oily and awkward that it coughed and groaned for hours before it moved its huge body into position. I felt as pure as Mayakovsky climbing into his aluminum vest, as dear as Pico della Mirandola watching his Jewish soul rise. I joined the Shakers at their sweet stations, the anarchists resting in the sun. For just 1 second I was in London again, in the Iron Palace. I was in Pittsburgh, sitting in the old reference room, reading Thomas Paine and William Blake and Peter Kropotkin, creating my first dreams. Today, as I ride down 25th Street, I smell honeysuckle rising from Shell and Victor Bellotta and Kay Diner. The goddess of sweet memory is there, staggering over fruit and drinking old blossoms. A man in white socks and a blue t-shirt is sitting on the grass outside Bethlehem Steel, eating lunch and dreaming. Before he walks back inside, he will be changed. He will remember when he stands again under the dirty windows, a moment of great misgiving and puzzlement, just before sweetness ruined him and thinking tore him apart. He will remember lying on his left elbow, studying the sky, and the loss he felt, and the sudden freedom, the mixture of pain and pleasure, terror and hope, what he calls honeysuckle. There's a town not far from here. Would you like to come in? That's okay, okay. Called Lancaster. And it's on Route 22. You know about it. The Pennsylvania Dutch live there. And there's a place there called the Dutch Castle, a giant building that sells gewgaws. And it's real. It's made of stone, but it looks like it isn't. It looks like it's made of paper. And there's this bunch of cities near there. You Pennsylvanians know those cities, called Intercourse and Blue Balls. And what are some of the other names? Bird in Hand. Paradise. What's that one? Virgin? Virginville? Did she say Virginville? That's too much. I don't believe it. That's made up. And it's run by, the whole place is Pennsylvania Dutch, a very fine culture that produces 7 sweets and 7 sours and nothing else. Today I am sitting outside the Dutch Castle on Route 30 near Bird in Hand and Blue Ball, watching the Amish. Amish or Amish? Amish. Watching the Amish. Today I am sitting outside the Dutch Castle on Route 30 near Bird in Hand and Blue Ball, watching the Amish snap their suspenders at the sunglasses. I am dreaming of my black suit again in the store in Paradise where I will be fitted out for life. A small girl and I recognize each other from our former life together in Cordoba. We weep over the plastic tote bags, the apple combs, and the laughing harmonicas, and fall down on the hot carpet, remembering the marble forest of the great mosque and the milky walls of the Jewish quarter. I will see her again in 800 years when all this is sorted out. I give it that much time based on the slack mind, the dirty drinking water, and the slow decay. I give it at least that much time before we lie down again in the tiny lilacs and paper love houses of the next age. I love the cows best. This is called cow worship. I love the cows best when they were a few feet away from my dining room window and my pine floor, when they reach in to kiss me with their wet mouths and their white noses. I love them when they walk over the garbage cans and across the cellar doors, over the sidewalk and through the metal chairs and the birdseed. Let me reach out through the thin curtains and fill the warm air of May. It is the temperature of the whole galaxy. All the bright clouds and clusters, beasts and heroes, glittering singers and isolated thinkers at pasture. Now, this is a hard poem. called Thinking About Shelley. And all it's about is swimming in a quarry. Shelley was, as you know, a romantic poet, lived in the early part of the 19th century. And partially with tongue-in-cheek, I assigned Shelley as my model. He really wasn't my model, though I mentioned him in a number of poems. As a kind of desperate ploy, since I have no model, I assign it to Shelley. I mean, I couldn't assign it to Byron, for God's sake. Shelley had spirit. Well, Byron had spirit too, but if somehow it was Shelley and not Byron. It's called Thinking About Shelley. Arm over arm, I swam out into the rain, across from the cedars and the rickety conveyor. I had the quarry all to myself again, even the path down to the muddy bank. Every poet in the world was dead but me. Yeats was dead. Victor Hugo was dead. Cavafy was dead. With every kick, I shot a jet of water into the air. You could see me coming a mile away, my shoulders rolling the way my father's did. I started moving out into the open between the two islands, thinking about Shelley and his milky body. No one had been here before. I was the first poet to swim in this water. I would be the mystery. I would be the source for all the others to come. The rivers of China were full of poets, the lakes of Finland, the ponds of southern France, but no one in Pennsylvania had swum like this across an empty quarry. I remember at the end I turned on my back to give my neck a rest. I remember floating into the weeds and letting my shoulders touch the greasy stones. I remember lying on the coarse sand, reaching up for air. This happened in June, before the berries were out, before the loosestrife covered the hills, before the local sinners took off their clothes and waded like huge birds in the cold water. It was the first warm day, and I was laboring in this small sea. I remember how I hoped my luck would last. I remember the terror of the middle, and how I suddenly relaxed after passing the islands. I remember it was because of Shelley that I changed my innocent swim into such a struggle. That it was because of Shelley I dragged my body up, tired and alive, to the small landing under the flowering highway, full of silence now and clarity. I forgot to mention, Shelley died by water. He drowned in the sea of regret. He died in the water. They had a burial. They burned his body. Byron, he had Keats's book with him. Byron, they all went down there and they sang songs. But that reminds me of a poem I just finished yesterday called In Memory of W.H. Auden. And the reason that reminded me is because, not that the poem is alike musically or technically, but because, anybody have a Kleenex? My ears get wet and my glasses slip. Not my ears, it's my head. And thank you. Thank you very much. Liz. They're alike in that in both poems I discovered that I was writing about who my master was, my proper master, the person. Poets like to think of themselves as in certain schools and under influences. I mean, if you would ask Auden's a poet that died about 10 years ago, who was your master? The answer would be T.S. Eliot. He learned everything he knew, he would say, from T.S. Eliot. He also learned something from Kipling and Yeats and blah, blah, blah. And poets like to have that, and I wish I could have had that. But in all honesty, and I'm not saying this in any arrogant way, I didn't have any master. There were poets I admired, but there was none who I patterned my writing after or my life after, and that's very difficult. It takes a long time when you'd go that way, very long time. And in a way, I realized that's what the Shelley poem is about. But in this other poem, which is called In Memory of W.H. Auden, which is a sort of pun on a poem he wrote and called In Memory of W.B. Yeats, who was a poet who died in 1939 and whom Auden loved. What happened was, just after I came back from Paris with that picture, I had this long poem in my pocket called Ishmael's Dream. Ishmael was an outcast, you may remember. The second son of, first cousin of, and all that stuff. And I had this, it was 8 million lines long, and I called up Auden, who I thought was my master, and told him I had this poem, and he wrote me a letter, and he said, please come to see me. So I thought this was the moment, the laying on of hands, the anointing, the recognition. I was about 23 then. And this was going to be the discovery. And I had two friends of mine waiting for me in my little apartment, which was about this wide, full of jealousy and envy, of course, but nonetheless proud to be associated with me, who was about to become a famous poet at the age of 23. And so I knocked on the door, and Auden answered. This was on Cornelia Street in the Village, New York. And we talked about cheese. There were 4 or 5 other people there. We talked about theater and cheese and various other things. Never did we talk about that poem. Finally, at the very end, I said, Mr. Auden, what about my poem, Ishmael's Dreams? Oh, yes. I do admire the last 8 lines. They were very little, tiny lines. And that was it. So for 25 years, I hated Auden. I would attack him. I talk about the decline of Auden's poetry. That was my favorite subject. And just recently, I've come not to hate him. And I realize that it's interesting. There's often a synchronicity, consanguinity, a lot of things. There are a lot of books being written about Auden now. They're all imitating my poem. I had to rush to do my poem before all these books came out. And in the poem, I turn Auden into a kind of wizard, a Prospero, if you've read The Tempest. It's a literary poem. And therefore, I am, of course, Caliban. I wouldn't be Ariel in the poem. Then I realized after I'd finished the poem that Auden had written a very beautiful poem himself, a long poem about the Tempest called The Sea in the Mirror, and there may have been an echo of that in my poem, though I don't know that. The poem is called In Memory of W.H. Auden. I'm going over my early rages again, my first laments and ecstasies, my old indictments and spiritualities. I'm standing like Schiller in front of Auden's door, waiting for his carved face to let me in. In my hand is the poem of my heart, I dragged from one ruined continent to the other, all my feelings slipping out on the sidewalk. It was warm and hopeful in his small cave, waiting for the right word to descend. But it was cold and brutal outside on 4th Street as I walked back to the 7th Avenue subway, knowing as I reached the crowded stairway that I would have to wait for 10 more years, or maybe 20 more years, for the first riches to come my way. And knowing that the stick of that old Prospero would never rest on my poor head. Dear as he was, with his robes and his books of magic, good and wise as he was, in his wrinkled suit and his battered slippers. Oh, good and wise, but not enough to comfort me. So obsessed was he with his other souls. I had to wait like clumsy Caliban, a sucker for every vagueness and degeneration. I had to find my own way back. I had to free myself. I had to find my own pleasure in my own sweet cave with my own sweet music. Once a year, later even once a month, I stood on the shores of Bleecker and Horatio, waving goodbye to that ship, all tight and yare, and that great wizard bobbing up and down like a dreaming sailor out there, disappearing just as he came, only this time his face more weary and his spirit more grave than when he first arrived to take us prisoner on our own small island. That poet I now could talk to, that wrinkled priest whose neck I'd hang on, that magician who could release me now, whom I release and remember. All right, it is now 5 minutes to 9, and I began at 8:15. Now, if you were good at mathematics, you would know what that means. It means that I've read for about 40 minutes. How exhausted are you? Are you very exhausted? Want to play some word games? Take out a piece of paper. I wanted to read, I have a lot of poems I haven't read. I could read 2 or 3 more poems from here, which I probably should do, or I could start on another project altogether. I was going to read you a portion of a new poem, which is fairly lengthy, and I probably shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that so you should say, oh, please do it. It's okay. I went to a reading with somebody, and he said, I should really stop. And, of course, his host said, no, that's all right. And the audience was gone. I mean, we were reading together. I was second, you know. There would start off with about this many people, maybe 1.5. By the time my turn came, there were 2 people there. My mother, you know, my cat. That was all. It's really true. So I think probably you really expected to stay an hour, didn't you? How many expected to stay more than an hour? How long did you expect to stay? Well, maybe I'll read you some of my long poems. You've talked me into it. It's quite different than anything here, and maybe your only chance to hear it. So it would take me hours just to explain it. Oh, what the hell's the difference? I'm interesting. I really am, compared to most poets, anyhow. We'll take a vote on that later. I want to read it because it's a political poem and a love poem. And, oh dear, it's very hard just to start. I can't. It's it would take me 20 minutes just to explain it and put it in context in order to do it justice. I really beg you to, but maybe I can just read one section. I'll just tell you that the third act, there are 2 people in this. A priest in his mid-50s, what was in the order of the nuns who were killed by the government in El Salvador? Maryknoll. Yeah, he's a Maryknoll priest. At least he's posing as one. They're Quakers. They're do-gooder priests, you know. Not like Jesuits, you know, build up empires. And a 15-year-old boy, there's a dialogue between them. Boy is living, it's in a little cardboard shack. The little boy has never been out of this place, and he sort of is a figment of the priest's imagination almost. Everything he knows from the priest. His dreamland, the boy's dreamland, is the Northland. He's New York City and snow and Santa Claus is in front of Bloomingdale's. The priest's vision is utopia, paradise. And he talks about the great good place. He's a socialist. And he's boring. He lectures endlessly. He's a school teacher. The boy wants to talk about love. The priest wants to talk about politics. The priest has a secret, which is what the play is about. The boy, in a sense, partially betrays him by forcing him to reveal the secret, which was a love affair. The relation between them is analogous to Prospero and, think of other dialogues, Prospero and Ariel, Don Quixote, Sancho Panza, father and son in Yeats's Purgatory. Let's see, another father and son grouping. Can you think of any? Older man, younger, anything like that? They're all kinds. There's endless versions of this. Crazy Cat, maybe. The Marx Brothers, I don't know. Okay, so I'm just going over this very quickly to bring it into context. At the end of the second act, after the priest is giving an endless lecture about what he believes in, because the boy after is dying. He says, "I'm dying, you know. What do you believe in? What is there left to believe in?" Then he gives him another long lecture that goes on for pages. And then the boy says, "I'm dying, you know." And this is the very end of the second part. Then I read you a portion of the third part. And the priest's name is Guzman, Father Guzman. 1 minute more, he says. "I do long for a world," he says, "where souls can live with other souls, where after 10,000 years souls can manage a little without authority or subordination, without shaming themselves in front of the rats and weasels. I could talk to you for hours about it, as if I haven't, doing my grunting and leaping, carrying my bomb around. But I have to do something about the sunlight, and I have to understand this hopeless place once and for all, every bit of treachery and madness, and what the monster up north is up to. And I have to see what part of the Spaniard the flat-faced Indian still lives in, as I wipe the oil from his mouth and bring back the dream of pearls and slaves and gold cities." Well, this is a start. A far cry, maybe, from Campanella in his heaven, or de Sade in his. Now, this is totally out of context, and it's hard, because there's been lectures on De Campanello and the City of the Sun. The sun has a special place in this. It's a search for El Dorado, the perfect place. It's South America, search for the dream of eternity, and so on. That endless search of the Spaniards and others, Sir Walter Raleigh, in America. And the boy says, he ends up, "I've thought about it a lot," and this will characterize the boy's character for you. I thought about it a lot, and if you ask me, there's nothing better than the simple pleasures. Of all the people you've talked about, I like Fourier the most. I would like to spend my days working and making love and smoking. I would love to maybe work for an hour on cardboard boxes. I'm good at that. Or fixing radios or sanding down a door and then sleep, maybe have a milkshake and fall asleep in the afternoon. I love to sleep in the afternoon and eat supper with some close friends and go to see The Informer or The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Badges? We ain't got no stinking badges. And then lie down for hours with my girl by my side, smoking and thinking. Priest, my package, where's my package? Boy, I didn't see it. I think it was under your bed. Priest, I keep it here all the time. Where is it? You took it again. You're playing games. Where is it? Boy, now don't get excited. The last time I saw it, I think, was when you went to get questioned. Maybe the police took it. They came and looked through your trunk yesterday morning, I think. Priest, where's my dress? Why are you playing games? You stole my dream, the one with buttons, the one with a rip in the sleeve. Come on, I know you took it, you bastard. Why do you always do this? Where's my dress? Where is it? Boy, wait, now just wait. We'll find it. So this is the uncovering. This is hard to take just in one fell swoop like this. That's the secret. That's what he's been carrying around, the dress of his beloved. Okay? And I'll reach a portion of Act 3. So don't get so excited. Not to be too hard to take. And there's all kind of echoes of conversations that have occurred earlier in the first two acts that we won't appreciate because they'll just come out of context to you. But rather than explain it, I will just tell you about it. Now keep in mind, they will play roles here. They'll be kind of psychodrama, but there are only two people on stage. There are only two actors here. Boy, I think you're right. I think we have to go back to the simple time before Gomez was president to understand what we are still prisoners of. I want so much to learn about my country. I wish I had the books. I wish I knew how to start and who to trust and where to go for everything. Do you know I never heard of him until yesterday morning? How long he was president? How many people he kept in his jails? What he looked like? How he worked out his cunning and his terror? Priest, do me a favor and be the dress again. I want to see how it rises in the wind and falls again on the body. I want to see the folds and half imagine it shaking in anger, then floating down the hall and turning around for the last time in the noisy elevator. Boy, how about a conversation between your man and mine? We have to talk about the country. We have to understand what U.S. Steel has done to the Mystic Mountain, how it stole the Indians' oldest dream. We have to nail down all the facts, right? All right, the dress. But I'm not going to make a fool of myself, even for you. Here's a broomstick, and that's as far as I go. I hate the dress. Always dancing, always smelling like soap. Half the people in Venezuela are living in hunger, and you are talking to a dress. Priest, why did you leave me? Dress, I didn't leave you. Why is it always you over there, dropping tears in your hat and smearing blood on your cheek, and me over here dabbing your forehead and wiping your eyes? Priest, why is it always you getting it wrong? Why is it always you with sticky hair and a little dreamy smile? Why is it you with a dish rag in your hand looking for dirt? Dress, oh, I love it. This is going to be one of those days. For some strange reason, I keep thinking of the Milky Way, remember? There are 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. 400 billion stars. You taught me yourself, remember? And in the universe, there are hundreds of millions of Milky Ways separated by hundreds of thousands of light years, each containing thousands of billions of stars. There are far more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand in all the beaches of South and North America, certainly more than there were on that sweet beach where you once showed me the bright sky and told me not to grieve over 2 dumb lives. Priest, I love it when you can remember. Well, why did you leave me? Dress, because you cornered me, because you didn't hear anything I said, because you erased me. Priest, why did you lie to me? Dress, to save myself. Why did you lie to me? Where were you when I tried to call? Taking a walk, hanging on the bathroom door. Why do you answer me like this? Because I'm only a dress, because you can see through me. Priest, I can't remember how we lived. I think I have forgotten everything. Do you know how many notebooks I filled up with my sorrows? How many questions I asked you? How many times I wrote the words down slowly and painfully? Dress, there's never a reason. You know there's never a reason. What could I do with your words? Where could I put them? I memorized the list. I had an answer for every question. But what is that? I died when I saw your sadness and confusion. Priest, I did it by categories. I did it by Roman numerals. I put a large star beside the major questions and a small star beside the others. I made my appeal to clarity as if that counted most. And I labored with language to overcome my panic and your stubbornness. Sometimes I was wise and buoyant, as if I were arguing for my life. I tried to generalize my condition as if I could move into philosophy and save myself from too much pain. Maybe we both wanted freedom. Maybe we both had the same ideas. Maybe we had to work our way through our own hells. Dress. If I could undo the past, I'd do it. It was impossible. I was exhausted. Dress. Excuse me. Priest. What good does it do to argue with a dress? What good does it do to stand up like a madman with your crooked finger pointing to the sky, making the same points over and over? Dress. Do you think you were the only one with feelings? I had a life to live. Do you know I had to live my real life on the sly? I had my own quirks. I was human, though you never seemed to notice. Priest. Whatever I did, it was for you as well as me. I went away thinking of you. I came back loving you. Dress. I sat there like a stone, watching and waiting. I had to stop. Priest. I know I exhausted you. I know you couldn't take my strange emotions. I was transforming us both. I was converting the two of us. We had to find the meaning of what we were doing. What were we? Two red muscles opening and closing? I wasn't suppressing. I wasn't evading. It was an act of triumph. I wanted to liberate myself. I wanted to liberate you. I wanted to be invaded. I wanted to see myself in the wilderness wearing a wolfskin and eating thistles and howling. I wanted to see you close to the fire, your mouth open with fear, your breasts sagging, your knees bloody from crawling over the stones, the spirit of the past inside you, all the horrors of love coming over you, all the senseless history like flames on the wall flashing up for a minute, the fat exploding so we could see just once what it was we wanted, what had hold of us. Dress. My God, are we going to do that again? Do I have to be the moon in its 3 phases, devouring you with my teeth and my hidden fluids? Are you going to hide in the closet and moan in one of your stupid foreign languages while I put on my nightgown? Or are you going to make me get on my hands and knees beside the bed so you can walk on top of me and break my back? Or turn me into an altar so you can kill your pigeons and rabbits over me? What do you want me to do? Why don't you buy a simple leather belt and get right to it? Or a black dildo faced with mother of pearl? Priest. I think I loved you for your meanness of spirit, for your foul mouth and your drunkenness and your greed. You are a racist and a demagogue. Anything touching thought, anything touching spirit is either boring to you or silly or galling. I'd like to see you with newspapers in your shoes or rats in your hallway. I'd like to see you for a minute with your true face exposed behind that sweet niceness, your eyes bulging, your tongue red and gluey. Dress. Aha, the man is talking. He's angry. He's going to bite our clit. He's going to pound our teeth. He's going to make us memorize 100 lines of Goethe. He can't stand our smell. He doesn't like the way we clean the house and wash the dishes. He's going to make us stand on the back of the bed. He's afraid that we will eat him up or drive him mad. Maybe we'll crunch his bones and suck the marrow. Maybe we'll drink his blood. Maybe we'll wash him in gore and tear the poor thing off. Priest, you know that doesn't work with me. We've done that over and over. What good does it do? If I weren't a priest, I'd sit beside you all day long. I'd learn to darn, I swear it. I'd learn the lost art of darning. I'd wear a pair of steel spectacles at the end of my nose and study the thin bridges going back and forth and the tiny loops my hand makes over and under like a slow machine. Dress. Why are you doing this? Why are you being a priest? You know you're no more a priest than I'm a nun. Where did you get the crazy idea? If you want to work with the poor, why don't you start in the Bronx? You're always talking about the Bronx. And where did you get the coat and collar? I love you in it. You really are a priest. But I'm not going to be Eloise. I'm not going to sit there like a grateful dog with my tongue out and my eyes shining while you instruct me. I could teach you, you know, if you would only listen. You were the one who wanted the pain. I know you loved it. Anyhow, you would make a terrible Abelard. You couldn't bear to be without your women. And I don't think you'd go for the purity. Your voice would crack and you'd get bored. Priest. I love the idea, though. We could be like sisters. We could write each other letters and talk about our new lovers with each other. We could change places, yourself, myself. We could be ghosts. Dress. We could lie hand in hand staring up at the ceiling. We could go to sleep in each other's arms without the slightest provocation. We could even kiss and touch and make breakfast together, black bread and cheese. Priest. Cleopatra always ate her lovers for breakfast. She'd leave little notes on the pillow. You have been eaten, my poor spider. Thanks for the stab. It was divine. I guess I won't see you again. Farewell. I'm on the side of the spider. Should I be Goethe or Keats or Franklin Roosevelt? Shall I carry a cane? Where shall I put my revolver? Dress. You know, I can't imagine the world without you. Be Byron first and then Woodrow Wilson. Priest. Do you remember when our shadows kissed beside the bed? Do you remember the birds on the white wall? How tragic they looked falling through space? Dress. Oh, don't do this to me. I don't want to think about it now. I don't want to think about the shadows. Priest, okay, enough, enough. You're breaking my heart. Boy, there's nothing sadder than talking to the dress. Priest, nothing sadder, I know. I think it's time for the horse. Now I'm going to read one more section. It's a much shorter section. And it's the celebration of Columbus Day. Boy, okay, this time don't spit in my face and don't pretend you're in church. You have to learn to talk into the mic. No drama. You talk in your own voice. Priest, who is now the American ambassador. He puts on a new face. Let me warm up. If you want to dream again about gold nuggets the size of tennis balls, if you want to imagine a square half a mile wide with glass colonnades and giant statues of ivory inlaid with pearl, if you want to see water cascading through a silver forest and feel the wind in your hair, then here is Gomez. He will give you back your great vision of El Dorado. He will perfume the air for you, and while you sleep at night, he will clean the streets of all the lazy whores and vagrants and all the peddlers and pimps and students and greasy Indians. Gomez, that's the boy. Wait, I'll go first. Good evening, this is your president. I'm sitting here with the American ambassador, a dear friend of mine, a good neighbor and a perfect gentleman, a lover of music and Greek philosophy. We've been talking together about the Spanish delusion, the city buried inside the jungle, the lost El Dorado. It is a Spanish delusion because the Spaniards died by the thousands searching for a shadow. There was no El Dorado. There was only a tribe of Indians who anointed their king with fragrant gum and sprayed him with powdered gold before they dipped him in their sacred lake, either to fool or appease their rich god. This was how it started, but gold was already singing in the blood, and this quaint king became a glittering emperor, and this village became a city of gold beyond the mountains. Juan Martin, that insane liar, talked about walking for 2 full days through the vast city before he reached the palace and the throne of the king. Dozens like him scoured the continent looking for emeralds and pearls among the fleas and vampire bats and mosquitoes, always deceiving themselves more than others. The city doesn't exist. The city never existed except as a new symbol for the buried dream, but that is good enough for me. For me, it is real. In my own words, I would say that this place lies in your heart, and you must search for it there as you would search for $1 on the road, as you would get on your hands and knees and hunt in the horse shit and the dust and the broken glass. Ambassador, I agree that El Dorado is real, even if it doesn't exist. Did crazy Raleigh go into the jungle for nothing? Did his poor men fight the water until their hands were raw and their clothes rotting and their souls exhausted for nothing? Did Mad Dog Gonzalo Pizarro and his starving soldiers turn cannibal as they clawed their way back to Peru for nothing? Did poor old Governor Berrio throw away his fortune and go through hell a second time for nothing? And Quezada and Fetterman and Von Hutten and Belalcazar, did all those conquerors turn hollow-eyed for nothing? Gomez, now my question for the ambassador is, tell me, what do you do in North America when people spit on the dream? What do you do to remind them of their sadness and their loss? Ambassador, in North America we try to be pleasant. It's sad, but our jails are too much like hotels. I don't want to say it because it sounds so stingy. There they are, locked up, but we have put their benefactors in charge of their fate. They sit there, all those priests and rabbis, weeping in the hallways, lecturing the police. Gomez, you have to be tough. I invented the hook, though others have taken the credit. I hang up women by the breast. I hang up men by the thorax. And I invented the wire. I wrap it around the balls. I call it the machinata. It is mine. Ambassador, you paid your foreign debts, I'll say that for you. You never quarreled with the United States, and you made peace with the English and the Dutch. You brought prosperity, and power has to come from